today. I'm Cynthia Smith, please Cindy. I am the Director of Design and Construction with Baltimore City Public Schools. And I just want to talk to you about some of the projects we've done recently because we're really excited about them and we really want to encourage this to happen in other districts, urban or not, across the country. So just a little bit of background about city schools, just so you understand where we're coming from. We are an enrollment of about 80,000 and dropping, so we're down to about 77 plus right now. 155 schools. We are not as big as Chicago, but we're not small. We do have a very high percentage of ESOL, low income, students with disabilities, and of course our demographics are very high African American. However, we are in the midst of a construction program. So back in like 2008, 9, somewhere around in there, a bunch of parents, students, staff, everything all rallied around Annapolis, our capital, we haven't built new schools in forever. Our buildings were in really poor shape. We needed funding. So, and we have actually documented proof right now that, we've been underfunded, of course, just like everybody, but underfunded at Maryland's standards for years and years and years. So, the state levied some bonds and gave us what's called the 21st Century Buildings Act, which was $1.1 billion to renovate or construct 28 buildings to house 32 schools. So we do have some co-locations. And most of them are occupied at this point. All but 5 are occupied at this point. However, that's still only 28 buildings out of 155. So that's not everything. It doesn't make a dent, really. So we still have to do, our regular capital construction program to try to alleviate some of the conditions of some of the rest of the buildings. In the meantime, we also created our first set of real design standards as part of this, so that all of our buildings were putting in the systems that we would like to see, as well as a set of ed specs, educational specifications, to make sure that the programs were what we wanted to see. So we have all that going all at the same time. And then, through our capital construction program, we actually submitted a request for 2 new buildings for what I will refer to as Graceland and Holabird. So it's Graceland Park O'Donnell Heights Elementary Middle School. We do run a lot of pre-K to 8s. So this is a pre-K to 8, as well as Holabird Academy, which is also a pre-K to 8. So the ed specs for these had them being identical schools, about 90,000 square foot each with a capacity of about 604 students. And that comes out to roughly 155 square foot per student, which is about what our state average is. We're running between 145 and 155 a square foot for pre-K to 8s. So we had those in our capital construction program, and right about that, all this is confluencing right at the same time, which is it's kind of this like miracle thing that never ever happens in like real life, but it did, where MEA, as a merger with Exelon and Constellation, MEA created this fund that was going to require 3 net zero schools be built in Maryland. So Howard County, one of the districts slightly to the south of us, took the first one. So along with all the stipulations, it had to be something that was already designed, had to be something ready to go, it had timeframes for when it had to be built by, et cetera, et cetera. Howard County had the first one ready to go, they took it. We got the second grant for Graceland. So we got the second grant from MEA, the first grant for us, $2.7 million. Some of it to cover the soft costs for the design, and most of it to cover the hard cost. And then nobody wanted the third one. Like literally nobody in the state of Maryland wanted the third one. It's not that there weren't buildings ready to go. Everybody was afraid to try it. So we were like, well, heck yeah, I want that one then. So we took it too. So we took and interestingly enough, backing up, 21st Century Buildings Program, which is administered by the Stadium Authority in partnership with us, didn't want it even. And they had plenty of buildings that are buildings in the same time frame. So we took the third grant for Holabird, which was the identical school. Of course, slightly less money for that one available, mostly for the soft costs, because they figured that since it's an identical school, the design was pretty much done. But the same amount for the hard costs. So we set an energy goal. That was the first part of 25 EUI, kilo BTUs per square foot per year, EUI in the language. And our first thing is that LEED Silver is mandated by the state of Maryland, and so that's what we were targeting. We weren't ever targeting anything beyond LEED Silver, really. We knew we'd get to gold. We recently got notice that we got to platinum, and that's without any even recycled content from the demolition of the existing buildings, because the demolition of the existing buildings is actually still happening. So we got to platinum and actually did our little award ceremony about 3 weeks ago for getting a platinum while the field work and the demolition is still happening. So pretty exciting for us. The major net zero energy strategies that we employed then, though, were, of course, PV, photovoltaics, solar panels on the roof. We only do roof. We don't put them on the ground. It's too much vandalism. It's just not worth it for us. Geothermal HVAC system, so ground source water heat pumps. We have solar tubes for daylighting in various spaces, as well as an energy dashboard. So there's live tracking of all of the energy use, and that is integrated into the curriculum in the building. So, and one school more than another, but you know, they're run with completely different principles, but they both have integrated curriculum with the dashboard information. Not grant funded, but as part of the project to get to the energy savings, which is so we'll get to is really the important part, is we also built these using ICF, which was new for us, fairly new in Maryland, definitely new for schools in Maryland. So insulated concrete forms for the exterior walls. So all of the exterior walls. And the state, for example, came out at one point to tour the buildings when they were in construction. The roof wasn't on, the floors weren't on, but the exterior walls were up. And the one building is really close to the highway, and you can hear definitely highway noise on the outside of the building. He walks inside and he's like, you can't, like even without the roof or anything, you can't hear the highway. So like it's a big thing, and I do that one again in a heartbeat. As well as demand controlled ventilation systems and CO2 sensors throughout. So targeting where we were, so you guys just mentioned where we were trying to get to. Where we started from was 106 EUI. So 25 is a big difference from 106. Holabird was slightly less at 82, but the code benchmark is 35. So obviously even jumping from 35 to 25 is a big one. And just so you know, we're tracking about 21 right now, so we're even less than that. That's the design where we were when we tracked it, and that's where we are. So huge buy-in, huge difference, big things we had to do to make a difference here. So our first thing then was, of course, to focus on efficiency for everything. When you start taking chunks out of the HVAC system, which is the easy, no-brainer one, it starts making everything else heavier in the pie, but then you have to take chunks out of as well. Plug loads ended up being a big deal for us, to the point where these buildings run, the staff is not allowed to bring in microwaves, mini fridges. You know, I think we all probably go to our schools and see, you know, that teacher that's got their little mini fridge stashed in the corner behind their desk. Nope, they get one warning, and there's a staff person in each building who's very much the net zero, like they're on this. So they get one warning, and the second time around, that staff member cuts the cord. So they don't get that, and they can't even just turn around. It's not even unplugged, because then if you unplug it, they turn around when as soon as the person leaves the room, they'll plug right back in. Nope, cuts the cord. So we take it seriously. This is a goal. So you know, we had to basically cut everything. We had lots and lots of meetings with lots and lots of people. Food nutrition, for example, was a big one. They didn't really want to budge on anything. We got them to change some things. For example, it used to be our freezers and coolers all had, you know, the cooler had one door out into the kitchen, the freezer had another door out to the kitchen. Now it's an integrated. You walk through the cooler to get to the freezer. So when you open the freezer, you lose some loss, you gain it into the cooler. So it's not a complete total energy loss from those. And it's just simple things like that that actually now have become our standard for the way of doing building construction. So the nice thing about it too is that these sites are actually only about half a mile from each other. Don't serve the same communities though, interestingly, but they do. And as you see, Graceland is really close to I-95. That would be the one that the state went out to with the sounds and said this thing about the sound. But they're very, very close to each other. The buildings are oriented 180 degrees from spun, so one has one and one the other. So the solar panels had to be tweaked a little bit. The geothermal wells, each site is a little different. Had a little bit less site to deal with at Holabird, but you know, we still had the site to be able to do the geothermal wells at least. But when we originally weren't getting the net zero grant for Holabird, we were going to do a case study of the identical schools and everything else. You know, how do they compare to each other? We're tweaking how that study all looks now. It's really more about how, because they operate differently, you know, different community associations in the evenings and the weekends, different after-school programs. So, how does that operation impact the usability and the energy use in each one? So just, a little bit about the actual design of the buildings with the private side versus public side. They are both very heavily used community schools. So, yeah, like I said, after school programs, one runs a GED program. There's actually an exercise room for community in the other one. Both have food pantries, both have clothing pantries. So they're very heavily served to the community. And of course that's one of the big lessons learned we'll get to in a minute. So occupant behavior. This was, of course, as we went through the design, this was the biggest part of this, is teaching the staff and really the students. The students have been amazing. They've been so excited about this entire thing. They're also one of our biggest proponents as we go through the buildings with making sure that the teachers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But, like I said, the cutting of cords is a real thing. And getting everybody to understand, we've only really done that once for everybody to know that we were serious and this is occupant behavior. But we had a lot of meetings throughout the entire thing warning everybody that we were going to do that kind of thing because if you don't have the behavior, you're not going to get it either. I just want to hit the timeline here because this is kind of 2020. You see, we occupied in 2020. This is not really the best time to occupy. And of course, we were all super excited about our new buildings coming up, and then we couldn't have a grand opening. It was super sad. Everybody was so excited, and all we could do was have a ribbon cutting with everybody masked and 6 foot apart, and just the mayor and the CEO, and that was all that could come. No community members, no staff members. It was so sad. But when teachers were allowed to come back, when we gave the option of teachers coming back and being able to teach classes from their classrooms rather than offices or their home, whatever they're doing it from home, every single teacher in both of these buildings came back. It's the only buildings we had in the district that happens. So everybody, it's not just the new school, it was that everybody was confident in the systems we put in these buildings. When we explained the demand control ventilation system, everybody's like, okay, we're getting back there. And then as soon as students came back, even when we went hybrid, a lot of, you had the choices of, parents could keep them at home versus returning them. We had about 90% of the students came back to both of these buildings, which was, I can't even tell you the statistic, but how much higher that was than the district, but it was significantly higher than the district-wide. At this point, Graceland is 100% occupied, so we are literally at 100% utilization at that building, and Hollibird, we're at 86%, not 86% students come back, but the utilization across the building is 86%. So both buildings are pretty much full, and both buildings everybody wanted to come back to, which we have not seen still in some of our other buildings in the district. Now, for the exciting stuff, where we stand. So this is our PV production that we modeled versus the actual. So we did have a drop at Hollibird. Briefly, we had a 3-week period of time where we had a damaged fuse in the electrical system, so we weren't tracking and we weren't able to actually produce any energy from the solar panels. But we are definitely right on. I mean, there's really, really close. This is right on, a little bit more in some places, a little bit less in other places, but pretty much right on where we modeled for actual production of energy using our PV panels. Our models for energy use, all except for in the summer months, and this is where the occupancy models and after-school programming and summer programming has really become a big lessons learned for us in understanding the kinds of programs that the schools are going to use and put in the buildings, because so far in the summer, that's where we've seen that our model wasn't quite as accurate as we would have liked it to have been because of summer programs that were run in the buildings. But so far, other than that, our model, what we modeled has actually been, has actually shown that we've actually used less energy than we modeled, which is good. And at this point in time, we have given back to the field, the grid. We, for both buildings, we have generated more energy than we have used. Now, yes, the first part of that model was during COVID, but even as we've gone into full occupancy, it's still tracking that way, in that we are generating more energy than we have used. We've given back as a whole. And remember, net zero is ever a year average. So that doesn't mean that every month or every day or even 2 months that you give back. It's an average. So you know that during certain months, the coldest or the warmest, mostly the warmest, that's not going to happen. But as we average it out, yes, we are actually now generating more than we have used. And there's hollybirds. So here's for the things that we've learned, and here's what I would do differently the next time. First of all, you got to have a good team, somebody who knows what they're doing. We used a local architect, it's Grimm and Parker Architects. They hadn't ever designed a net zero school before, or in this case two, but they had an MEP firm that they hired as their sub that had CMTA engineers, which is an amazing firm. They're kind of like the net zero gurus. They really kept us on track, did all the meetings with all of the people with food and nutrition and our IT department and our maintenance department about everything we needed to do. We did, and they helped us make concessions too, of course. My maintenance department didn't want solar panels, period. Like they were like, we don't want to do this anyway because we're going to have solar panels, all these penetrations. No, we used a ballasted solar system. So the only penetrations are where the cables and things controllers have to go through the roof. Since it's a ballasted system to try to minimize penetrations for maintenance. The end goal always is the students. So the building, ease of use, simple designs. We do not have any fancy electrical lighting controls, but there are controls. They're controlled. They turn off. It's occupant, loads. So once there's a certain period of time that the room hasn't been occupied, the lights will turn off. But it's nothing fancy. It doesn't change with the daylight coming into the room or things like that, because that becomes a complicated system that then is more inclined to break or break down, and that then it really impacts how we get to net zero. So we didn't do that. Those are the kinds of trade-offs that CMTA helped us make, so that we could appease both operating it and making it so that we could operate it and keep it this way, versus actually getting to net zero at the same time. So you can do it with simple systems. It doesn't have to be complex. Building as a teaching tool. This one's huge for us. The school is not just a place you go to for education. It should be also a place where you can be educated using the building itself. We have a lot of really nice and not expensive ways to help the students understand the energy use of a building and understand the benefits that this building brings. We have a solar learning lab on the roof where it's got one trackable panel and 3 stationary panels that are at different, one's flat, one's at 45 degrees, and one's at 90 degrees, so that they can actually see how that, different ones generate different energy, and where the sun hits it, for how that happens. It's all on a nice roof garden, right off the science lab, so the science lab kind of has control over the roof garden. They use the 5th grade classes to teach them about taking care of the garden, so it's really kind of like part of the 5th grade curriculum uses the roof garden a lot as part of their curriculum. There's a weather station up there as well. And then at the entry canopy to the building, we actually put in, it's a clear panel bottom, so you can actually look up and see the underside of the solar panels. So it's the one place other than the roof garden where you can actually see the panels, and anybody walking in the building then can look up and see those solar panels. Of course, we have a garden outside with the cistern gardens, or one of the outdoor learning spaces being the big thing now. And then, of course, the energy dashboard. And then what I think is one of the most coolest things is that in various places in the building, we actually have cutaways. So like in the ICF walls, you can actually see a cutaway with a plexiglass plate over it, so that students can look at it and see how, the insulation and the concrete and the rebar, and then the more insulation, it's a really just awesome thing, as well as vision panels into mechanical rooms and into where mechanical ductwork runs and things like that, so that you can really learn about how the building runs. And then to go with all of that, there's signage similar to this throughout the building at each one of those, whether it's a cutaway or whether it's a mechanical room or whether it's at the dashboard, that really explains what that is, how that works, how that impacts sustainability in the environment. Must have number 2. So to get to net zero, you have to have PV. Solar is required. Now, you could get any building to net zero if you had a big enough space to put, any building at all. You just have to have a ton of PV. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense. The ultimate goal is energy savings, right? We have 1,300 panels. The cost of the panels and versus the efficiency of the panels, just in the 2 years for construction, changed so significantly for us that the panel price just dropped Now, I don't know about that right now, but the panel price when we were in construction dropped significantly when we were building. So we actually had a hard time even getting to that $2.2 million that they gave us through with the PV. So we actually, we were able to put some more stuff into that grant for it. But we did, there's also trade-offs in this too, in that where the entry is, the foyer, that main hallway, I'm trying to think here. So this is like the foyer and main hallway here. And then where the media center is, which is right above it, wouldn't have to be 2 stories. Those don't have to be 2 stories spaces. 1-story spaces would have been fine. The shadows from the roof make a difference. So you'll see, you also don't see any rooftop equipment up in here. So we made decisions for negligible costs, because we definitely did the cost-benefit ratio. For negligible costs, we raised the roof in certain areas to flatten it out so that we didn't have the shadows from the different roof elevations, so that we could have more PD on the roof. And and then absorb the cost of then the increased envelope then for that. We also have a very nice size, very well insulated. You cannot hear the mechanical equipment in the rooms below it, but there is a mechanical room above the music rooms, where all what would normally go on the roof are, because we couldn't have, if you put all that stuff on the roof, now you're also cutting away spaces that you could put PV. So all of that was all part of the design decisions that really drove the building design. So all of that's inside. You don't see anything. We don't do ground. We try to minimize entirely any ground mounted equipment because of vandalism and things. So it's all up inside the equipment is, and all of the PVs on the roof. When you see the funky shapes like the H shape, that's the gym, where it's kind of the H-shaped solar panels. That's because we have solo tubes in the gym, and then running down the kind of line that kind of runs down this way where it kind of bumps in and out. That's through like the cafeteria. And I'm trying to remember what the other one is. That's a roof hatch there. But the biggest one in the gym is we do have solar panels in the gym, solar tubes in the gym. Most of the time we can run the gym without even turning lights on. We get so much daylight in through the solar tubes. So, that's obviously huge energy savings right there, because you have the big lights in the gym normally. So we ate some space up from the roof for that, but traded off the fact that we're going to have energy savings by not having to use the lights in there. So it was a lot. All these little incremental decisions you make through design make a big difference when you're getting there to get to net zero. The other thing is I would never do this if I didn't have control over the envelope. I was telling somebody this last night. Like literally, the control of the envelope and being able to have a really tight envelope that the air doesn't leak out is like the biggest thing about this. You just want to make sure you have the right indoor air quality, of course, is part of that. And of course, views. We still have windows. There's still lots of windows in the building. But when they did the pressure tests for our buildings, they said that the results were one of the highest that they've ever seen, or the lowest leakage that they've ever seen, best that they've ever seen for an envelope. So you've got to just make sure you have really good detailing, because that air leakage out, you lose so much energy that way when that happens. That makes a big, huge difference in the cost then. So training is still ongoing. We have to train maintenance, have to train the staff for using the curriculum. Reconciling utility meters was tough. We did purchase our solar outright. We don't do PPAs. We have a really good energy rate as it is, so a PPA just did not make any sense for us. So we did purchase our solar outright, and I would do that again also, rather than trying to do a PPA. It just doesn't make any sense for us. The big picture stuff, our construction costs. We came out to about $358 a square foot, including the site and including the net zero. That doesn't, so you can take 2.2 million off of that right from there. That is less than or equal to, we are typically running around 365 in the state of Maryland for new construction. So as you can see, even with getting to net zero, we did it for the average cost. It did not cost us any more to do this. And it will cost us a heck of a lot less to operate the buildings as we go forward. Just a couple of the then myths that we have found as we've gone through this process. It doesn't have to be difficult to operate. You can do it with simple systems and simple choices. We tried to make as simple of choices as we could, because our maintenance team, they didn't want anything that was complicated. We didn't want to make things harder for them. We know that maintenance costs are going to cost a lot for running the building, so we didn't want to do that. So lighting control, simple. fairly simple HVAC system, you know, making those choices where we had to, if we had to go to something complicated, making the choices in conjunction with them to make sure that we're doing things that everybody could work with. As I just showed you, we were less than or equal to what the average construction cost is. Now, who knows what the market's doing right now, but I think the whole thing is going to raise anyway, so it still should hopefully even out. The concept, though, of any building being net zero, like, that's not the intent. At least that's not my belief of the intent. Control over design choices are a big thing to get to net zero. But I think getting to something that saves energy is 3/4 of the battle anyway. We can get to 25 EUI, which is now, by the way, in my design standards for any building that we're building new, or if it's a renovation where we can have, you know, some decent control. If I'm just doing an HVAC system, obviously that's not the case. But if I'm doing a replacement or a renovation and addition, my design standards say that they have to build to 25 EUI. Because either way, that's going to save us over the long run. It's a huge, and that's, you know, whether or not I can ever put PV on the roof to then generate the cost, great, but at least I'm going to be saving in the energy costs over doing it. Any team can do NCE? Maybe, maybe not. There is a learning curve. I would suggest that it's a lot easier for the users to overcome the curve if the designers understand that. So having at least one person on the team who has done that before, I would, you know, highly recommend. Like for us, it was CMTA. But now we know Grimm and Parker has done it. So like that, you know, so as you know, it will eventually grow beyond just the few that do it now. But you know, it's a lot easier for us to overcome the challenges if there's somebody helping us guide it through it that understands what the challenges are. And one of them is being restrictive. Yes and no. I mean, there were user-occupant behaviors that had to be adjusted. And that will continue to change. There will have to be continual training with the staff as well, because as staff turnover happens, they're going to have to do that as well. So, and I know that was just a very brief, but if you have any questions, the question I always get asked is, would you do this again? And I say that I have a replacement building in design again right now that we are doing with ICF. We are doing with the 25 EUI. We're telling them to make it solar ready, so the roofs will be leveled out. I don't know that I'll put PV on the roof at this point, but it will be there if I'm ready for it. So I don't know if we have time for questions. I think I ran over.
We do actually have time for a couple of questions.
Okay.
Here, Clarence.
Yep, thank you for that. That was a great presentation too.
Thank you.
I was curious, as it related to, you said the operational side, your maintenance team, of course, you know, you indicated that they wanted to make it as simplistic as possible. I was curious, did you then have to modify your budgeting for your facility side for the building? So again, because of the complexity of the systems or the systems themselves, for typical budgeting.
So our custodial staff is budgeted through the school district or for the schools. So we have an interesting model where it's called fair student funding, where the school gets allocated funds based on their enrollments, and as part of that, the school actually itself pays for custodial staff. Maintenance staff, there is not an assigned person, for example, per school building. We have what's it's called area facility managers. They have like a specific area of the city that they work with. We didn't do anything in this building that we hadn't done already elsewhere, except for the dedicated outdoor the demand control ventilation system. That was the only thing that was new. A little bit of training for them, for the maintenance staff on that. The custodial team actually, it's actually going to cost the schools less to do now their annual cleaning, because we also used BBT for the floor, bio-based tile for the floor, rather than your normal VCT. So instead of 5 coats of wax, it's 2. So it's actually going to cost the schools less now too, for a very minimal first cost investment. It'll cost them less to actually then clean it as well. So we didn't adjust anything on that. Yep. It's a little blinding down here.
I can tell you we're in the same phase where you're at. We're not trying. We'd like to develop and get up to net zero, but not seek certifications because it costs so much down the road. Right now, we're seeing a 22.5% increase in construction and costs over the last year.
Yeah.
Which is huge to school districts.
Yes.
The other thing, did you seek out? I'm a big fan of solar, but I'm not a big fan of putting solar on roofs. Only under certain circumstances. Do you look at parking lots?
So,
or did you?
Well, because we're urban, we don't actually do a lot of parking lots, to be honest with you. We have a very small parking lot at each one of these buildings that only holds about 10 cars each. Most of our sites are dedicated for, basketball court, track, field, whatever. When you look at relatively what the size site we have for these schools versus what it is, like if we were in a county, we have like a third of the sites. So we do have one solar field in the district that is a parking lot on a high school that the school itself actually paid for. The school put it in as a grant that they got on their own thing. We did not, and we we're the roof. Yeah. But yeah, we don't have a whole lot of parking lots yet anyway. And so like I was saying, we've got, schools that are, street to street in the city, right? Because we're urban. So, and where any additions are only going up, those roofs probably aren't ever going to be big enough, but I don't even have a parking lot to do that there either. Like, so that would be a no. I wouldn't be able to do that for those. Limited. But if I had the space, I would do it like this. Yep.
We have time for one quick question. Does your utility provider pay you a premium for the energy that you all produce?
No. No, they do not pay for it. Unfortunately, no. That's not part of the deal. No, but we do get to prove, of course, if we are not using it, we don't have to. We don't obviously pay for it. So, we will be averaging the bills, so they'll have to average the bills out. So we will get to, we won't necessarily get money back from them, but we will not owe them money for certain times.
Okay, well, Cindy, thank you so much for an excellent presentation.